Let's begin with the infamous cover. Even prior to listening, the album already provides the, quite considerable in 1971, shock of seeing the male artist sprawled in a femininely alluring pose, adorned in a woman's dress. This provocative image is a portent of things to come, but androgyny was not part of Bowie's art just yet. His inspiration, he stated later, was the Rossetti painting which he was trying to mimic. Dante Gabriel Rossetti was a 19th century English painter who started a new school in British art, with paintings that went against the traditions that existed since the Renaissance, and had a startling effect on the viewer's perception. And not only the style but also the content scandalized the Victorian mind, offering a blend of eroticism and spirituality that went head-on against the prevailing puritanism of the times. A new mixture of eroticism and spirituality is of course what The Man Who Sold the World album is all about, and it is understood why Bowie would want to invoke Rossetti. But if we try to locate a specific Rossetti painting that inspired the cover, we will come up short. I believe that Bowie got mixed up and ascribed to Rossetti a painting that actually belonged to one of his disciples. The actual inspiration is surely this painting, 1871 Sleeping Beauty by Edward Burne-Jones. The Sleeping Beauty is, of course, that comatose princess from the fairy tale, who has to be awoken. But Bowie is wide awake in the photo, signifying someone who has already awakened from his slumber, someone presenting a new kind of human awareness. One wonders if Bowie realized that exactly 100 years had passed since Burne-Jones produced the painting, and according to the fairy tale, it is time for the sleeper to wake up. But I believe Bowie is playing a deeper symbolic game here, one that requires some knowledge in the history of art. Burne-Jones's painting definitely owes something to Sleeping Venus, a Renaissance masterpiece by Giorgione. In this painting from 1510, the nude female body is idealized and seen to be in harmony with nature. We the spectators are voyeurs who gaze upon this image, not as something sexual but as something harmonious and beautiful. That is not the case with the even more famous, or rather infamous, painting that was directly inspired by it, Tizian's 1538's Venus of Urbino, in which the image becomes eroticized. Here, the naked goddess is moved into domestic settings, into our world, and alluringly looks directly at us, enjoying the sexual arousal she creates in us. Of course, 19th century bourgeois culture, with its Victorian values, would not admit this arousal. Many of the people who went to art galleries did so mainly to gawk at pictures of naked women, but they pretended to come for the art. To cater to this hypocrisy, nude paintings always depicted divinities or mythological figures, to distance them from our world, and help the spectators pretend that there is nothing sexual going on. Into this reality, Edouard Manet dropped the bomb, with his 1863 scandalous painting Olympia. Once again we see the reclining nude female, obviously imitating Tizian's painting, except the figure is not that of a goddess, but of a contemporary Parisian whore, staring at the viewer mockingly as if saying, "This is what you came here for, isn't it?" Around the same time that Edward Burne-Jones returned to the original non-sexual Sleeping Venus figure, with his fully covered Sleeping Beauty, Edouard Manet prostituted her completely, to ridicule his era's hypocrisy. Bowie's album cover, I believe, aims to be to Sleeping Beauty what Venus of Urbino and Olympia are to Sleeping Venus. His right arm is obviously modeled on Venus of Urbino, while his left arm takes after Sleeping Beauty. While we think that we come to the album as spectators, voyeurs of the artist's inner world, he gazes at us mockingly, knowing that it is actually our inner world that will be affected by the contemplation. The new feature added in the picture is a card held delicately between Bowie's fingers as if he is about to throw it, and other cards scattered all over the floor, suggesting that he was the one who dealt them, presumably to us. Cards are a symbol of chance, and the card dealer is someone who controls chance. The image suggests that Bowie is a man who is not going to let chance dictate his fate, but intends to master his own destiny, and ours. The album title starts to make more sense now. As early as this album, then, Bowie is already settling into his artistic worldview, in which the artist does not just portray a certain ideal through his art, but aims to become it. Glaring at us from the cover as if he was himself the very thing that 19th century painters aspire to represent, Bowie assumes a transcendent figure that refuses to let us, the world, master his fate and deal him his lot, but rather deals his own cards to us. Even before we unsheath the vinyl and give it a spin, we are already encountered by an image of someone who pretends to break away from the past and offer a new kind of spirituality, replacing the dying spirit of the 60s counterculture. Now, let's go in and examine if he lives up to his pretensions. When you're trying to free yourself from a certain worldview, you attack it at the source, and the source of much of the counterculture's mentality was beatnik philosophy. The premise of this philosophy is that our minds are conditioned by a technocratic industrial militaristic culture that erases our spiritual side. So in order to free our spirit, we must first of all beat our mind, destroy our thought processes. This can be done in several ways: drug intake, meditation, shock treatments, hobo life, fast rides, uninhibited sex, wild music, all designed to throw our minds into another zone so that it can no longer repress its spirituality. The moniker beat comes from this method of beating the mind, but also from the word beatific, designating the pure and joyful state we supposedly reach when we manage to free ourselves. The influence of beat is felt in the subject matter of most of the album, that takes us through some of these consciousness-altering states, but in all the Madmen, we find that the beatnik logic is a sham. The hero believes that he is liberating his mind through shock treatments, living a spiritual and free life, when in fact he is only descending into the pits of madness and incarceration. Bowie, then, continues the beatnik search for higher spirituality, but criticizes the beatnik dogmas, and brands them to be just as false as the dogmas of the culture they're rebelling against. Bowie's attack on the counterculture focuses not only on its techniques to achieve a higher spirituality, but also on what it believes the human spirit to be. What the beatniks, and subsequently the hippies, believed was that all entities in the universe are constantly moving and grooving together in harmony. The problem, according to them, is that our rational consciousness detaches us from reality, turns us into onlookers instead of participants, so we are out of this harmony, out of the groove, and cannot enjoy it. When you beat your rational mind, you let your irrational side, instincts, drives, intuitions, inspirations, take over and lead the way, and you become part of the universal harmony. Their model was the small 3 jazz combo, where every musician is carried on the wings of spontaneous improvisation, and still they are tuned to what the others are doing and play together. The belief was that if we can make the whole world groove like that, our lives would become harmonious and happy. Bowie presents a different picture. He also shows humans as driven by strong irrational forces, but rather than leading to harmony, these forces lead to chaos. The counterculture believed that in a peaceful world everyone would be happy and groove together, but in Saviour Machine, Bowie envisions a peaceful world, and comes to the conclusion that it will not satisfy humanity's innermost drives, and will therefore lead to disaster. And in Running on Blues, when the peaceful, the anti-war movement that sprang out of the counterculture, finally managed to end the Vietnam War, the soldier protagonist is left unsatisfied, so he goes out on a killing spree. The universe just isn't what the hippies believed it to be. This, then, is Bowie's first truth, that the universe is not harmonious at its core, but rather violent and chaotic. How should we deal with this truth? We could succumb to it, like the soldier in Running on Blues, who promotes oblivion and turns chaos into his ideology. But that way will surely lead us to our doom. Another way must be sought. Hence, Bowie seeks the answer in philosophies that view the universe as irrational and chaotic, such as the writings of Aleister Crowley, who promoted black magic as a path for a better way of life. Crowley believed that we are driven by the will, an inner powerful force that is suppressed in Western culture and should be liberated. Liberation of the will, he believed, will connect us to supernatural powers, which will take us to a higher plane of existence. Crowley's influence is felt throughout the album, especially in the attitude towards sex that seems to follow Crowley's view that through sex we are releasing the will. In She Shook Me Cold, the hero is a womanizer who thought he knew everything about sex, until an encounter with some fiendish woman teaches him that purely physical intercourse that he calls sex is not the real thing, and truly powerful sex is an expression of the will, an inner force inside him. Here, too, Bowie is putting a spin on the beliefs of the counterculture. He carries on the call for sexual liberation, except he doesn't do so in the name of love and harmony like the hippies, but in order to release the will and take us to another level. Similarly, in Width of a Circle, we hear of another mystical intercourse that takes the hero to the heavens and connects him with the supernatural being, like Crowley promised. But the end of the track finds the hero in hell, in a much lower state than the one he started out from. Bowie, then, seems to take from Crowley the idea that we are driven by our will, and that sex is one of the ways of liberating it, but to reject Crowley's appeal to the supernatural. The will should be directed elsewhere. If not the supernatural, then perhaps the Superman. With this album, Bowie begins his dalliance with the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche and his idea of the Superman. Nietzsche theorized that the whole universe is imbued with a force he called the will to power, a force that moves every entity and drives it to overcome other entities. There is no order in the Nietzschean picture of the universe. There is only chaos and struggle, and any semblance of order in it is merely temporary balance. Humans are also driven by the will to power, but since they also have intelligence, they can channel it in positive directions that will bring happiness and beauty instead of violence and oblivion. By nature, said Nietzsche, humans are driven to overcome one another, but they can redirect this drive and employ it to overcome themselves, and constantly recreate themselves in a way that is more powerful and joyful. The end result of this gradual self-overcoming, he prophesied, would be the Superman, a being who derives joy from every aspect of earthly existence. These ideas also saturate the album, and reach their peak in the Supermen, in which Bowie envisions a quasi-Nietzschean utopia of Supermen and comes to the conclusion that it isn't all that good. So Nietzsche's ultimate message, or what Bowie thought his message was, is also rejected. But Bowie does absorb some of his ideas into his own developing worldview. The gist of Bowie's new manifesto, then, is a call to move on from the hippie worldview and set a new goal for the counterculture. The revolution should be done not in the name of bringing peace and harmony to the world, but in the name of empowering the human race. For this new message he needed a new sound, something more powerful than the playful flower power music of the hippies, and he found it in the fledgling style of heavy metal. Heavy metal was not about musical harmony but about musical power, and its subject matter was darker, sometimes foraying into the same realm of black magic that Bowie was exploring. Mick Ronsohn's guitar and Mick Woodmansee's drums delve into the possibilities opened by Cream and Jimi Hendrix, conversing with the new musical language that was being developed at the time by bands like Black Sabbath, Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin. The riff of the Supermen was actually given to Bowie by Jimmy Page, heavy metal pioneer and a Crowley enthusiast himself. Another feature that distinguished heavy metal was its love for the power of technology, an infatuation that went against the grain of the beatnik hippie anti-industrial stance. This is accentuated on the album by Ralph Mace's innovative use of the synthesizer, and Tony Visconti's equally innovative production. While hippie music was now veering towards country rock, a style that celebrated nature and rejected urbanity, Bowie retorts with black country rock, inviting us to his dark and industrial musical landscape. And all of this is built upon the two concepts that were already the leading guidelines in Bowie's art. In his first album he presented himself as the Bowie knife, which cuts through both sides of any argument and tries to reach a third way that lies beyond. By his second album, he already added the perception of himself as the Pierrot, the sad clown who presents a mirror image of society through his art, and exposes humanity's shortcomings. Supplementing the Superman concept, Bowie redefines his role. Through his art, he implies in After All, he will be the clown that presents humans who try to reach a better form of existence, but fail due to man's fallacies. But by telling their stories, he will cut through these fallacies to try to create a Superman mentality, a mentality that will not fall into the same traps. He already started to present those false messiahs in his previous album, in tracks like Space Oddity, Signet Committee and Wild-Eyed Boy from Free Cloud, and now he adds Width of a Circle, All the Madmen and Saviour Machine. These tracks all present characters who fail, but by going through their tragedy, we might find new possibilities for happiness. With hindsight, we can see that at least one of these records already contains the seed of what was to grow and become Bowie's essential truth. In Width of a Circle, the hero realizes that God's a young man, that the most divine feeling is to be found not in a fixed and eternal form, but in rebellion and transformation. The hero then has intercourse with an alien being that brings about a transformation in his soul and causes a temporary divine sensation, but then he succumbs to this being, and it drags him to losing himself completely. In time, the realization will come that what brings about the joyful sensation is not the particular being that you are copulating with, but the fact that you are copulating with an alien being, and the trick is to break away in time and hook up with another alien. It is unclear how much Bowie was aware at the time of this intuition, but what we can deduce is that he no longer sees himself merely as a knife that cuts other people's outlooks, but already starts to believe that he has found a path to form a unique outlook of his own. The title track suggests that he intends to succeed where all those heroes of his records have failed, that he is going to live a heroic way of life and manage to keep it up for years and years, not letting himself fall. This, then, is what the figure on the cover is telling us. Casually holding the King of Diamonds between his fingers as if he is his master, he sends the message: the highest rank of existence you could come up with in your materialistic mind is the King of Diamonds, but I represent something that is higher, and I can play with your heroes and turn them all into cards in my own game. I intend to be the man who sold your world in exchange for something better.